G'day anglers, it's Harry here from Canterbury Fish Game. Today we're going to talk a bit about trout jigging and the setup that I use when out on the lakes. We've seen a few anglers doing this now and you'd be surprised in success. It takes a little bit to get your head around, but once you've got the hang of it and a bit of figuring out and problem solving to do, then you'll be surprised the good quality fish you can catch out here. So I'll just run through a bit of the setup that I use. So a rod, this is actually a slow jigging rod which you'd use in the ocean. However, it does work incredibly well for this because it's just the tip of the rod that's bending while the remainder of the rod stays stiff, which is quite key because you don't need a lot of movement in your flies. You're not doing big jerks with the rod, it's just really delicate twitches because you just want your flies to do that. That's what attracts the fish. So yeah, it's just a two-piece. I prefer an overhead style reel, just nicer to handle, bit more control. And I'm just running a 200 size overhead reel and with 15-pound braid, and now that's coloured, so every 5 meters it changes colour so you understand the depth. And then on the end of that I've got a nylon or fluorocarbon leader. And when it comes to my trace, as you can see with jigging you're actually allowed to use 3 flies, or you can use soft baits with unweighted hooks. So as you can see we've got 3 flies rigged up. They're quite spaced apart because I want to cover as much of the water column as I can. There's no point in having all your flies within a metre because you're fishing a very small depth of the lake. And off that I pre-tile my traces at home because they're quite time consuming to tie, and it's a bit easier. That way the morning you come out on the lake you're ready to go. And when I tie them I actually wind them onto an empty either leader or tippet material spool. Just makes it easier to handle and they unravel a lot nicer. I've tried them in bags in the past and they can get tangled up and it gets frustrating, especially when you can't hit a fish on a beautiful calm day. And then with my trace I tie what's called a T-knot. You can use 3-way swivels, but I prefer not to because it just creates more noise in the water. The less noise and moving parts the better, and it just looks more streamlined, so it's just less things the fish can see and they can focus on your fly more rather than a big swivel. And then for weight just run a 2-ounce ball sinker with a swivel on top. So the only downside with a long trace with your 3 flies is it can be a bit cumbersome to handle or when you're moving to spot to spot. And now when it actually comes to the fishing side of it, on depth sound is very important to have. Obviously you need to be able to read the depth of the water, and you can actually see the fish on your sounder too once you understand how your sounder works. It's taken me a little while to figure this out, but I tend to like to start at that 7-8 meter mark, and ideally you can get a very soft breeze that pushes you into deeper water. So I would start at 7 to 8 meters and I would drift out to about 15 to 20, and then once I've got to 20, or depending how I feel or where the fish might be, depending on what you see on the sounder, you can go deeper. But if you're not seeing anything beyond 20 meters on the sounder, I'd boat back to 7-8 meters and do that drift again. There's no point being anchored in one spot because you really need to cover the water. You want to be able to move. If you anchor in one spot, you're relying on fish to come to you. You actually need to find the fish. And yeah, so I'll just quickly drop this down and just show you what the rod does. So you can see, I've hit the bottom, and you can see when I'm jiggling it, I'm hardly moving it. You can see my tips doing all the movement. The rest of the rod is basically stationary. And that's really what you want. If you have generally a soft rod, which you can do it on, you'll find the whole rod moves and you're probably actually putting too much movement. So it's just a matter of trial and error. Not saying rush out to buy a jigging set. It's always good to try these things on your current rods now, but when you properly get into it, it definitely makes the fishing side of it a lot easier. And yeah, that's about my tips on trout jigging on the high country lakes. So try something new, give it a go, and hope to see you out in the water. Cheers. Right, so now we're off the water. I just wanted to break down into some more details about the rig that we were using when we were out on the lake yesterday. So we'll start from the bottom. So these are the 2-ounce sinkers I like to use. I've just got a swivel there, so that's fine, stops your line twisting, and 2 ounces is a good weight. If you go heavy, you can go heavier if the wind is stronger, but obviously when you have a fish on, it's even more weight, and it's just, you don't get as much feel when you put more weight on the bottom. And then if you go too light, you run into the same aspect. You'll never get to the bottom and your line will just end up on a big angle. And then the flies, so we're just running small, like woolly buggers or rabbits or even feathered lures, and so sort of varying from a size 4 hook to even a size 10, something like that. Even something with a little bit of flash, like the bait fish that are in these lakes, smolt, they're quite a silvery colour, so it's quite good having a silver grey pattern like that on your rig. I'm always about variation, so I'd always have a darker fly and a lighter coloured fly like this, and then an olive, or you could have brown, black and olive. It's always good to mix it up. There's no point having 3 olive woolly buggers because then you'll never know what's happening, so variation's key. And now I just want to break down the rig. So as mentioned yesterday, kept on the empty spool, and then as you unravel it, you'll tie one end to your reel, so that's where your mono leader was off your braid. You'll just do a connection knot for that, and then as you can see, you wind it off. There's my first connector there, so that's where my fly is going to come off. And I'm going to tie my fly to there. That wants to be about 150 to 200 mils off your main line, as you can see there. So when you tie a T-knot, which we'll put a link below, that comes as a loop, and you just trim one end of the loop right at the base of that knot. And I tend to have my flies about 1 to 1.5 meters apart. Now that's so, for example, if you're fishing in 12 meters of water and you've got your 3 flies a meter apart, you're covering a quarter of the water, the lake depth. So I mean, you're covering a lot more ground, whereas compared to trolling with one lure, you're actually just targeting a specific depth. And the other advantage of this method too is when that thing is on the bottom, you're on the bottom, and you can change your depth a lot easier when, as explained yesterday, when drifting. Whereas if you're trolling, all of a sudden the lake can vary from your desired depth of say 10 meters to 6 meters, and then you've hit the bottom, so you've got to wind up and reset up and continue fishing. So that is the advantages of this jigging method, is it's very adaptable and easy to change your depths without too much effort, and you can catch fish right through it. So I hope that all helps, and yeah, that's all we've done, and it's had good success, so hope to see you out there.